The first time I laid eyes on Balance of the Planet, it had this kind of magnetic pull. Its simple interface, the artwork that ranges from childish to haunting, something about it was so jagged and raw. It stood alone in the sea of software that rehashes the same aesthetics, mechanics, emotions. Balance of the Planet puts you in the role of policymaker for the Earth, and you have to fix it. All of it. Primarily, that means environmental issues, but you will quickly find that every subject in the game fits into a titanic web of interconnected relationships. No cause without effect, and no effect without cause. In order to even begin to understand the game, you need to consult the manual, which not only contains an exhaustive description of everything, but also a walkthrough of basic gameplay. This is the results screen, which lists positive and negative categories along with points to measure their predominance in the world. You will notice that there are many more negatives than positives. Clicking on skin cancer deaths will take you to a screen with a short explanation as well as the causes and effects. Clicking on a cause will lead you to its own page with the same setup, and tracing the causes of skin cancer deaths will eventually lead you to chlorofluorocarbon emissions. At this point, you have two more causes to explore: CFC tax and materials demand. These are intertwined, because selecting the CFC tax will let you set it to wherever you see fit, but that has consequences. You may be helping the ozone layer in the long term, but there is a demand for the machines that produce CFCs, and it isn't as simple as telling people not to use them. Industries need them to feed people, to refrigerate foods. Starvation is the largest negative category, but you'll very quickly learn that despite global hunger, we actually produce more food than we need as a species, and people are still starving. At the same time, that food surplus exists because of the use of pesticides and other chemicals that have caused the destruction of land, and poor countries demolish forestry to make way for more farmland, leading to desertification and soil erosion that pollutes water supplies. You may think that investing your tax money into renewable and clean energy like solar and nuclear is a good idea, but there's an inevitable price to pay for safely handling waste and radiation deaths. There is no positive without a negative. Everything is so reactive to everything else, and problems often can't be directly addressed. Only things around them can be altered, and when you can directly influence them, it causes a string of knock-on effects if you don't make other decisions around it. For Christ's sake, there's a negative category for deaths caused by people falling off of roofs while installing solar panels. It's a nightmare. Who made this game? Oh. Hi, Chris. Chris Crawford is one of the most passionate game designers you will ever see, and while he's faded from the public eye in recent decades, I think he's worth talking about. Crawford discovered video games in 1975 while studying at the University of Missouri. Immediately hooked, he began experimenting and acquainting himself with computers so that he too could make games. He got his start programming strategy titles like Tactics and Legionnaire, before selling his first game in 1978, only 3 years later. He was brought into Atari that year by Alan Kay, the lead scientist at the company.
Let me tell you this, Alan Kay is so much smarter than I am, I feel stupid when I'm talking to him. I mean, most other people, when they think, they go in little tiny steps, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Alan doesn't work that way. He goes in big leaps. A, J, M, R, Q. And boy, if you want to keep up with Alan when he's talking, you got to run along behind him, filling in the blanks. B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, and it's hard. You have to work to keep up with this guy. So I learned a tremendous amount from Alan. But You know, the tricky thing is, most of what I learned were the blanks that I filled in, and it's impossible to say whether the blanks that I filled in were blanks that he intended for me to fill in, or blanks that just came from my own experience. I'll never know. But perhaps that's the mark of a truly great teacher.
This relationship would shape the way that Crawford viewed not only technology, but his own potential. One of the most important things he'd okay was, in his words,
was how to dream well.
Crawford defines a dream as the halfway point between fantasy and planning. To fantasize is easy but unproductive. To plan is intensive and menial. A dream, therefore, is hard work. It's bringing two extremes to the middle. As he says, many people can fantasize, and many people can dot their I's and cross their T's, but few can do both. This new goal, this good, honorable dream, is what Crawford calls the dragon, and is central to his talk at the 1992 Game Developers Conference.
Let me tell you about my dream. I dreamed of the day when computer games would be a viable medium of artistic expression, an art form. I dreamed of computer games encompassing the broad range of human experience and emotion. Computer games about tragedy or self-sacrifice, games about duty and honor, patriotism, satirical games about politics, or games about human folly, games about man's relationship to God or to nature, games about the passionate love between a boy and a girl, or the serene and mature love between husband and wife of decades, games about family relationships or death, mortality, a boy becoming a man or a man realizing he is no longer young, games about a man facing truth at high noon on a dusty main street, or a boy and his dog, or a prostitute with a heart of gold. All of these things and more were part of this dream, but by themselves they amounted to nothing, because all of these things have already been done by other art forms. There's no advantage, no purchase, nothing superior about this dream. It's just an old rehash. All we are doing with the computer, if all we do is just reinvent the wheel with poorer grade materials, well, we don't have a dream worth pursuing. But there was a second part to this dream that catapulted it into the stratosphere. The second part is what made this dream important and worthy. And that is interactivity.
You can see the spark of individuality in Crawford's mind already in 1983's Gossip. In this Atari 8-bit title, you and 7 other characters trade opinions about each other, eliciting emotional reactions. The game itself never saw a proper release, but the system behind it was ambitious. Here, when games were still action-driven, was one about interpersonal connections. These concepts would linger in his mind. In 1987, he caught his first glimpse of the dragon, and it's no coincidence that this is the same year he would develop Trust and Betrayal, the legacy of Seaboot. Seaboot is set on a moon colony where several alien races have colonized and live amongst each other. The colony is led by a shepherd named Seaboot, who has developed a psychic language to overcome the translation barrier and reach harmony between the races. After Seaboot's death, representatives from each species apply to take his place, and the game begins. To win, you must collect 8 auras in each of 3 emotions: fear, trust, and love. At night, mental duels take place, which are kind of rock, paper, scissors battles, where knowing the aura count of your opponent is key to victory. Thus, in the daytime, the player can talk to the other contestants, getting an idea of their personalities and making trades of information. You can form an alliance with another, then trade their info for some of your enemies. The interactions you have with them will reveal their strengths and weaknesses and which of the 3 emotions they're vulnerable in. All of this is communicated through a system of icons rather than words. Now, you can remind yourself what an icon means at any time, but after a bit of experience, they're easy to memorize, and you can fully immerse yourself in the interpersonal game at hand, where battles are fought, but communication is the greatest weapon. Why was this idea of communicating so important to him? To paraphrase from the dragon speech, language was developed to communicate ideas. The advantage of this is that one person can learn from many people, but on the flip side, it allows one person to teach many people. It may seem obvious now, but the development of lectures was a revolution in the efficiency of teaching. The information can be spread to hundreds and hundreds of people at once. Now let's look at an alternative. If you were to pull an audience member from that lecture and take them to a room and have a one-on-one conversation with them about what you're trying to teach. Now they have the ability to respond, ask questions, interact. They get an experience tailored to them, and in that way might have a much more effective learning process. What's happening here is a trade-off between efficiency and effectiveness.
That's the trade-off we make, and over the centuries, we humans have learned that the gains in efficiency outweigh the losses in effectiveness, and therefore we choose expository methods. But the sacrifice remains real. We haven't ever solved that problem. It's been with us since the beginning of history. Every single artist has faced it. Every communicator, every teacher, every novelist, every sculptor, every singer, every musician, every painter, every novelist, every single artist through all of human history has been forced to sacrifice effectiveness for efficiency. Until now.
Because play isn't just a way to learn, Crawford suggests that the purpose of play is learning. But for that, we need to turn to his book, The Art of Computer Game Design, written the same year as Seaboot, 1987. Not only is this one of the first books written on game design, it's also one of, if not the, first books to discuss it as a craft. One of the first sections is called, Why Do People Play Games? Take a litter of kittens. When they play, they hunch over, pull their ears back, and pounce on each other before they claw and bite and scratch, all without actual injury. It is certainly play, but it's more valuable than that. They aren't wasting their time, because when the adult cat sees a mouse, it hunches over, pulls back its ears, and pounces on it before, you know. Games are thus the most ancient and time-honored vehicle for education. They are the original educational technology, the natural one, having received the seal of approval of natural selection. We don't see mother lions lecturing cubs at the chalkboard. We don't see senior lions writing their memoirs for posterity. In light of this, the question, can games have educational value, becomes absurd. It is not games, but schools that are the newfangled notion, the untested fad, the violator of tradition. Game playing has been observed only in mammals and birds. The phylogenetically earlier orders, fish, insects, amphibians, and reptiles, have not been shown to engage in game playing. Gameplay seems to be associated with that quality, which we have clumsily attempted to measure with brain size, intelligence, and ability to learn. This correspondence cannot be attributed to accident. Clearly, gameplay is an important component in the development of many creatures. In this way, play is not just a distraction, it's the way that a kitten learns to be a cat. Games are the way that we learn how to be humans. Interactivity.
Because now we have a technology that changes everything. With the computer, I can take my ideas that I want to communicate. I can express them in the form of an algorithm. And then I can take that algorithm and I can write it up as program code. And then I can put that program code onto a floppy disk. And then we can mass produce that floppy disk. We can make millions of copies of it, spread it all over the world so that millions of people can play my game. They can interact with my ideas. And because they are interacting, I achieve effectiveness. And because we are mass producing the disks, I achieve efficiency. That is the revolutionary nature of the computer. It allows us to automate interactivity, to achieve both effectiveness and efficiency. And that was the most important part of my dream.
Toward the end of the book, Crawford outlines the 4 stages a medium goes through as it matures, using television as an example. At first, it is expensive and limited. Televisions aren't widely available to most people, and the programming is narrow. Next, it becomes affordable and expansive. Not only can televisions be owned by most people, there's a wide array of content for multiple audiences. At this point, it enters the 3rd phase. The medium shapes the audience. Televisions can now be found in most households. They become the go-to for entertainment and leisure. However, the content is what Crawford would call an imitation. Instead of reading the newspaper, watch the news. Instead of going to a theater, watch a play on TV. Those radio dramas you listen to, now they have visuals. Once the medium is integrated into the public, it enters the 4th and final stage of maturation. The audience shapes the medium. Creatives who understand what television is now create content that could only ever be on television. It wouldn't be the same as a radio drama or a book or a movie. It has to be TV. I think Crawford wrote this book in the fever of Seaboot, the revelation he'd had not just about what games were, but what they could become. It could only be a game. To adapt it into any other form would almost be disrespectful to its vision. This was the glimpse of the dragon, a clue he followed until it led him to Balance of the Planet in 1990. Seaboot sold poorly, unlike many of his more accessible strategy games. It did, however, review well, with high praise given to its ideas. Balance of the Planet was his second shot at creating a game in the same realm.
But in 1990, something else happened that served as the kick in the side of the head that woke me up. And that was the reaction to my game, Balance of the Planet. When I set out to do Balance of the Planet, I wanted to do a game about environmental policy. But I wanted to do a game that had some honesty in it, some integrity. I didn't want to do dolphins dancing across the screen. I didn't want to do Zork dressed up in Greenpeace clothing. I wanted a game that honestly addressed environmental policy issues. And that was a pretty tough problem, but I was very proud of the approach that I came up with. The solution I came up with was a pretty good one. It really did address those issues. And in fact, Balance of the Planet remains the best way to learn about environmental policy trade-offs. It's better than any book or television show or videotape. If you really want to understand it, that's the best way. And so, boy, was I proud of that product. And so I was really stunned when the industry rejected it, pretty widely. Perhaps I think the overall reaction of the industry was best summarized in a review of the game written by some fellow at Computer Gaming World. Let me just read you a few. He said, regarding Balance of the Planet, it is the closest thing to art to be sold as computer entertainment. But it's just not fun. Therefore, if the game is not fun, it simply wouldn't be right to endorse it. A more explicit rejection of my dream cannot be imagined. Here they are saying, yes, it's art, but it's not fun. Therefore, now, I'm sorry, Mr. Shakespeare. Your play, Macbeth. Oh, boy, it kept me up with nightmares for 3 nights. But, gosh, Will, it's just not fun. I mean, can't we get a few belly laughs in there? Maybe we can have Macbeth tell a few mother-in-law jokes to his wife. Yeah. And you, Mr. Beethoven, Your Ninth Symphony, ho, it makes my heart soar in awe at the majesty of the cosmos. But you know, it's just not fun. I mean, we need something we can dance to. We need some cute, catchy little tunes we can snap our fingers to. Many years ago, I left the crowded cities of the eastern seaboard and crossed the Appalachian Mountains and came upon the virgin forests of Kentucky. And there I built myself a cabin and I hunted the dragon. I wasn't very good back then, but I was learning and it was fun. And then more people came. Now we have a town with stores and people being busy and streets and property lines and lawyers and this place has gotten too damn civilized for me. I mean, I just don't fit in. So I walked down the main street one last time. I waved goodbye to a few old friends, but most of the faces I see belong to strangers. It's a good town. I'm proud of the role I played in its creation. But out there, to the west, beyond the Mississippi, beyond the Great Plains, await the Rocky Mountains and the dragon. He's there too, waiting for me. Let me tell you about a guy by the name of Don Quixote de la Mancha. Insanity is an inability to come to terms with reality. And Don Quixote was definitely insane because he couldn't come to terms. But there was a reason. The reality in which Don Quixote lived was a sordid and ugly reality. The people were scrabbling for survival. Don Quixote didn't want that. He wanted to live in a world where there was truth and human dignity. And yes, love. Where other people saw a flock of sheep, he saw a mighty army. Where other people saw a windmill, he saw a dragon. Yes, Don Quixote was a crazy old fool. But you know, he was more honest about his dreams than most people. And for that, I honor him. I have committed myself, I have dedicated myself to the pursuit of the dragon. And having made that commitment, having decided that once and for all, now all of a sudden, I can see him. There he is, right in front of me, as clear as day. I never thought that I would see you this clearly. I always saw you in brief glimpses in the dark. But now, you're so much bigger than I'd ever imagined. And I'm not so sure I like this. I mean, yes, you're glorious and beautiful, but you're ugly too. Your breath reeks of death. No, I never had any childish fantasies of conquering you. That thinking is for children. You are beyond that. Indeed, I can see stretched around your feet the bodies of my predecessors, and all you have to show for it is a few nicks and scratches. But do you have to laugh at me that way? Am I so pitiful that you can sneer in my face like that? Yes, you frighten me. You hurt me. I felt your claws ripping through my soul. But I'm going to die someday, and before I can do that, I've got to face you, eyeball to eyeball. I've got to look you right in the eye and see what's inside. But I'm not good enough to do that yet. I'm not experienced enough. So I'm going to have to start learning. Today. Here. Now. Come, dragon. I will fight you. Sancho Panza, my sword. For truth. For beauty. For art! Charge! Charge!
never came back to the room, and he never really returned to the industry. This talk was given in 1992, and he has no credits to his name afterwards. He was one of the founders of the Game Developers Conference, but he would make no more appearances the following years, instead devoting himself to a project he called Storytron, his own engine for creating story-based games. We can see what happened to it on his website. His blog, Erasmataz, is still updated with his musings, often multiple times a month. An entry from May 31st, 2021, laments his attempts at the story-driven engine. Ultimately, he's decided that computers can't recreate the spark of man-made prose to tell a cohesive story. I am sorry to conclude that I spent 30 years barking up the wrong tree. Oops. At the end of his book, Crawford gives a prediction of the future of games. To conclude, I see a future in which computer games are a major recreational activity. I see a mass market of computer games not too different from what we now have, complete with blockbuster games, spin-off games, remake games, and tired complaints that computer games constitute a vast wasteland. I even have a term for such games: cyberschlock. I also see a much more exciting literature of computer games, reaching into almost all spheres of human fantasy. Collectively, these baby market games will probably be more important as a social force than the homogenized clones of the mass market. But individual games in this arena will never have the economic success of the big-time games. By 1985, software stores will be as common as record stores. By 1990, they will be as common as bookstores. On entering the software store, you will be confronted by racks and racks of games, with serious software occupying a smaller portion of the floor space. Just as in a bookstore or record store, you will see aisles devoted to particular tastes in games. You can browse through collections of cowboy games as your companion explores the latest space games. Perhaps you will look for the latest product of your favorite author, all of whose works are collected in alphabetical order. On the walls, you will see posters announcing the latest smash hit games by software superstars. After evaluating a number of games, you will make your choices and purchase them. Then you'll go out to the parking lot to discover that some idiot has dented the fender of your car. Some things never change.